It's Monday, September 23rd, 2024, and boy, do we have an update for you. The last time we talked, we were talking about these swirling things down here in the Caribbean and in the Eastern Pacific Ocean, and we talked about the potential for one of these to be a big deal in the near future. A lot of things happened over the weekend. We got a lot of new data, and right now I can confidently say that we are within 72 hours of an approaching major hurricane likely coming towards the United States through the Gulf of Mexico, thanks to this specific swirling area right here in the Central American zone. It's a Central American gyre. It's going to move up into the Caribbean and become a hurricane very quickly. In fact, right now, as I'm recording this video, the latest National Hurricane Center update does have a 90% probability of this forming into a tropical depression or a tropical storm. By the time you're watching this video, this is probably already going to be designated as a tropical depression or tropical storm, and we're likely already going to see tropical storm watches and warnings being rolled out, especially down there in the Caribbean. And it won't be long before we start seeing those warnings up along the Gulf Coast as well. Last week when we were talking about this, there were a lot of questions. There was a lot of uncertainty around what this storm would do. And while there are still lots of questions, most of them have been answered by some of the newest data that has come in, especially last night. And the answer to those questions is somewhat concerning, especially if you have interests along the coast. What we're looking at here is very likely we're going to have a hurricane rapidly intensifying over the very warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico as soon as Tuesday or Wednesday, and then that's going to make its approach to likely the Florida coast as we go later into the day on Thursday and into the day on Friday. This is the latest HAFSA model, which has done a really good job over the past few years predicting hurricane paths and intensity, and it's showing a landfall in the Big Bend area. And you can see here just how large the storm is. It's going to have a pretty large impact area. You're going to feel the impacts from this all across Florida, even if this makes landfall in the Panhandle. And you're going to feel the impacts of this very far inland as well. We're talking Georgia, South Carolina, all the way up towards the Appalachian Mountains. This is going to be a high impact storm for a lot of people. And once again, this is going to be a very fast developing system. This is the HAFSB model showing a hurricane as soon as late tomorrow into early Wednesday, coming right through the sweet spot between the Yucatan Peninsula and Cuba here. It's going to stay over water likely the whole time. As it goes into the Gulf of Mexico, it's going to enter an area where we have 31 degrees Celsius surface temperatures on the ocean, and it's just going to, there's nothing really stopping it from exploding, and that's exactly what happens here on the HAFSB model. We have a 908 millibar low pressure center here off the coast of Florida, predicted by one model. It's not necessarily going to be that strong, but if it is, we're talking about a category 4, maybe even higher hurricane in the danger zone, somewhere between Destin and Tampa, and anywhere in between could be in the impact zone here as we talk more about the potential path here in a moment. Don't pay too much attention to the exact placement of the center of this hurricane on any of these models today. This is going to wiggle back and forth a lot as we go forward, but the potential path is really starting to narrow down compared to where we were just the other day. And once again, we've got to talk about how large the storm's going to be. Even though it'll be Thursday or Friday before we have landfall, you're going to start to feel the impacts from this storm here in the United States as early as Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. The outer bands of this thing are going to be impacting Key West, potentially even Miami, Wednesday morning. And of course, we're going to have life-threatening rainfall and flash flooding happening around this time down there into Cuba as well. We're just going to see continued rain and deteriorating conditions across Florida as we go through Wednesday, Thursday, all the way up until landfall. In fact, Wednesday in some of these outer bands, we could already be talking about some tornadic activity, and that would obviously increase as we get closer to landfall as well. So this is going to be a very fast situation. We're going to go from right now having a potential tropical cyclone all the way to a strong hurricane in a very short period of time. So I want to make sure we get out in front of as many people as possible and talk about the potential impacts here. Once again, well inland, central Georgia, South Carolina, you guys, if this happens as modeled right now, you guys could experience a pretty significant storm here in terms of tropical storm force winds and flash flooding as we go through Friday and Saturday. Now, here's the latest projection as far as wind speeds go. It looks like we're already going to have a hurricane. A lot of the models are suggesting that we're going to have a hurricane as early as Wednesday morning here as it goes through through the space between the Yucatan Peninsula and Cuba. This will likely be called Helene. And as you can see, the HAFSA model is already suggesting that we're going to have some wind gusts up to 94 miles per hour around this time frame. And just watch how fast this thing blows up and develops over the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. By the time we get to Thursday around 2 a.m., we're talking about 150 mile per hour gusts out there, 160, 180, maybe 190 mile per hour gusts associated with this major hurricane potentially early in the morning on Thursday. And then from there, it's untelling what's going to happen. Is it going to continue to strengthen on its approach to the Big Bend area or the panhandle of Florida? Some models are even taking it a little bit farther east. Or is it going to weaken a little bit on its approach, which is, quite common for storms that take this kind of path? But even if that happens, even if it weakens during the last 6 hours on its approach, it's still likely going to make landfall as a major hurricane if the rapid intensification happens over the Gulf of Mexico like we expect it will right now. Here's a look at a little bit of a simulation of what the radar could look like from the HAFSA model. Once again, this is not exactly what it's going to look like. I just want to show you as much imagery as possible to kind of give you an idea of where we are right now. The tornado threat and the wind threat's going to be with us across all of Florida, once again, starting as early as Wednesday. But things are really going to start ramping up Thursday. And we could be talking about tornadic activity well up here into portions of Georgia. And of course, tropical storm to hurricane force winds could be felt way outside of that center of circulation. So even if this thing makes landfall in the Big Bend area, Tampa, Clearwater, maybe even farther south towards Fort Lauderdale, you guys are going to have to deal with some of the winds and some of the storm surge concerns that come along with a big hurricane like this. HAFSA model shows landfall happening around 5 p.m. on Thursday. There's a pretty good consensus there that it's going to be late in the day on Thursday when this thing comes onto land. And then, of course, this could still be a hurricane well inland into Georgia here. Definitely a tropical storm as it gets into central Georgia. Big time flooding and severe weather / tornado threat associated on the eastern side here. This is something that we're going to have to be watching and covering. Probably will be live on this channel if this goes as modeled. Wednesday doing pre-coverage, Thursday doing landfall coverage, and then maybe even Friday doing post coverage and severe weather coverage. So lots of developments here, lots of things to prepare for, and not a lot of time. So once again, if you have interests along the coasts or anywhere in the southeastern United States, right now is the time to start preparing. Now, once again, a lot of our questions have been answered about whether or not this is the real deal or not. But one of the questions that still remains is the exact placement of where the storm is going to go. The latest ensembles here show a much more tightly packed potential cyclone path. However, there's still a pretty decent margin of error. Landfall could technically still happen anywhere between Biloxi, Mississippi, and Tampa. Okay, though if you're in those areas, you need to be concerned about this. But the more central you are between those two areas, the more likely it is the storm's going to make landfall near you. I'm thinking the Big Bend area is a pretty good bet right now, but it could be a little bit farther west than that. It could be a little bit farther east. So once again, this is the latest ensembles, bunch of different models put together, and you can see that we're coming to a pretty good consensus here as to where the storm's going to go. In fact, whenever the National Hurricane Center releases their cone, which it's probably already released, once again, by the time you're watching this video, it'll probably look very similar to this. So keep that in mind. Another thing to keep in mind here is the intensity of this storm. Lots of models are showing this thing becoming a major hurricane between 48 hours and 72 hours from now. A couple of them are even making it up there into Category 4 status, and it wouldn't be surprising to me if we saw some Category 5s coming out of some of these models. One of the things that's really going to have a large impact on the exact placement and intensity of this storm is the big upper level trough here that's going to be kind of steering Helene as it comes towards the United States. So the reason why this thing's able to rapidly intensify at all is because of the open area here on the eastern side. There's a good outflow channel, which could very much so let the storm increase in intensity very quickly. So that's why we expect that there's going to be some rapid intensification. However, the closer this thing gets to Florida, the more interaction it's actually going to have with this trough, and that's going to go one of two ways. It's either going to just kind of take a hint from the trough and be pushed a little bit farther to the east, so that means that it could be a little bit more of a concerning situation for places like Tampa, or it could, especially if it doesn't increase in intensity as much as we think it will over the Gulf, it could be influenced by it in terms terms of becoming more attracted to it, weakening a little bit more, and then coming up a little bit farther north. So it really just depends on how strong it is down here before it starts interacting with this trough. That's going to determine how the trough dictates what happens with the storm. So if it's a really strong hurricane, it's likely just going to get pushed a little bit farther to the east. If not, then it might weaken a little bit and get pulled up a little bit farther to the north. So this is something that we're watching very closely right here. I don't see why it wouldn't become a strong hurricane. We do expect that rapid intensification to happen. So I'm leaning towards maybe a little bit farther east. We've got to be concerned about a potential landfall here. So the Big Bend area, I don't think we're going to get as far as Tampa, but it's on the table. Keep that in mind. And then of course, once we get done with landfall and everything that comes along with that, we're going to be watching this thing go all the way up through Georgia, South Carolina, up into the Appalachian Mountains. It's going to continue to be causing problems Friday and Saturday. And this is something that we're going to have to cover likely through the weekend before the energy from the storm completely fizzles out. Lots of flash flooding, winds, the tornado potential is going to be high in a lot of different places. So this is something that we're going to be watching very closely all week, and it's going to be our main focus. So right now, if nothing changes, and by the way, things could change. All of this model data that we're looking at right now is completely driven by satellite imagery and buoys and stuff like that. We haven't had any hurricane hunter data implemented into the models yet. That's not going to happen until later this evening. That's going to add a little bit more accuracy to the forecast, and it could change things completely. It could change the path, it could change the projected intensity, and I'll let you know first thing tomorrow about what kind of updates we have there. If things don't change much at all, I'm going to have a video tomorrow. It's possible that we go live Wednesday as a pre-stream, because I keep talking about how by the time this video goes up, this, and this has already happened. Covering rapidly developing situations like this makes more sense in a live stream format, I think, than a video. So if things are going the way that it looks like they're going to go on Wednesday, we're probably going to be live Wednesday. We'll be live Thursday, obviously, covering landfall. And then we may even be live Friday covering post-landfall and the potential severe weather that continues up the East Coast associated with this storm. So pretty busy. Once again, don't be scared. Be prepared. The best case scenario here is that we get a Category 2, low-end Category 3, making landfall, hopefully decreasing in intensity because it's interacting with that trough. It is unfortunately going to happen somewhere in Florida, I think. So we can deal with that, right? We know how to handle that. So I just hope that everybody watching this is preparing, going over their hurricane evacuation plans, and doing everything they can to mitigate the risks associated with a storm like this. I don't want it to catch you off guard. This is the kind of storm where people will say that we had no idea it's coming, even though we've been talking about it forever, and now we've got plenty of lead time to actually take action. So I'm going to get to work here preparing for this. Of course, we've got Storm Chaser Caleb Beecham going down there in Halt Force 1, and I'm going to have lots of updates over on Twitter. Make sure you follow me over there and subscribe to this channel, turn notifications on, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. Ooh.